you're going to have the lesson more firmly than if you don't engage in that.
I actually think it will help burnout. I actually think it will get more.
As I understand it, the purpose of homework is to act as a mnemonic, to put into practice the lessons that you learned in the class.
So we're using AI to figure out what the issues are. What are the things that can be discussed about this? And then we have a discussion in this context. This is the classroom right here. This is where the most learning is occurring.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is November 5th, 2024. You're watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we are talking all about where AI fits in education. Specifically, we want to have a conversation today talking about not necessarily tutoring, but sort of that idea of AI being that personal assistant to students in business as well. There's been some interesting reports and research papers that have come out over the last, year, honestly. This is all sort of like moving in a certain direction. So today it's all about having that conversation, talking about education again, as we have several times before. With me is Jyunmi, Andy, and I'm Brian, and we will have Beth. She just had to do a quick reboot in order to make sure that everything was working right. So we've actually been talking about this too. Like, we just recently moved over from StreamYard to Restream. For any of those interested in the back end of the show, we talk about this sometimes. And if we're being perfectly honest, we're struggling with Restream. So we made a pivot for all the right reasons, and unfortunately, we're still seeing some issues, and it is causing us. So we apologize if you ever tune in and you're used to watching us and one of us looks a little fuzzy. It'll never be Andy. Andy never has problems, but the rest of us do. I know. Andy always looks like Andy. It always works out perfectly. So, but we apologize. We're actively working to get all that situated, and we're gonna try a different platform again. And I guess if that doesn't work, there's always StreamYard, and we'll be back where we started. So, and Jimmy's like, no, that's not happening. Anyway, let's get on the topic today. We do have Beth. She just joined us. And so, this came out of the idea for today's show specifically, although we've been talking about AI in education for quite some time. But there was a research study that was done at Harvard. It was actually done a year ago. So different models, but the idea is pretty clear. And it was the idea that they tried to do their best to do a controlled experiment. I believe it was in physics. It was controlled all the way through. They made sure there wasn't bias. They used two different instructors to get rid of instructor bias. They really did their best to make this a controlled experiment. And the idea was, hey, do students learn better if they have like an AI assistant, AI tutor, AI helper, insert whatever word you want there? Do they comprehend the information more strongly, I guess would be a word for it. And although it was a small study, it did make some waves. It only had about 100, I think it was 194 students in it. So sample size, not particularly huge. We'd love to see these in orders of 10,000 and then make, but that's hard to do and control it and do it at universities and stuff. But it does beg the question, as we saw the results coming out of this, where is AI going and where is it going to fit into education? Does it mean that teachers, hey, great news, we have this huge teacher shortage, totally going to be fine because now we have AI? No. But what does that mean for teachers? How does the role of teachers going to change in the future as AI becomes more readily available and an assistant to all students? So there's a lot to discuss here. Just sort of opening up the conversation, but who wants to kind of jump from there and start with your own thoughts on this?
Let me give you a little more detail on the structure of the research. Sure. The research was done at the end of 2023, but it was just published in May.
Okay.
They do some serious analysis of the outcomes, right? So it was just published in May, and now it's just starting to kind of hit the conversation boards of people who are masters of educational issues and pedagogy. Particularly, I want to give credit to Dr. Philippa Hardman, who is one of the leading AI advocates or observers and analysts for the application of AI in education. So now take us to Harvard. First-year students in physics, the introductory course in physics. And this study was done in weeks 9 and 10. So quite way into the progress of this physics course. And it has a crossover design, meaning they're going to have a control, which is, okay, you're going to spend this week, week 9, this group is going to go just through the normal course of what was already an advanced method of pedagogy called, I forget what it is, active learning. Okay, so there's this active learning pedagogy model, and they're using this at Harvard as their normal, approach to teaching. But in week 9, they're going to pull a certain group of students out, and they're going to put them with an AI tutor and have them do this at home. And that AI tutor was a special program developed at Harvard that was based on GPT-4. Okay, so that they did some serious work with their AI teams to develop a very sophisticated AI tutor, and I'll describe something about that as well. But now imagine this group gets pulled out, and they don't get to go to the class on that week. They just do the AI tutor at home. And then the next week, the part of the class, the half of the class that stayed in the class, they go home and the others come back. So this crossover design allows you to eliminate the bias of the quality of the students who are involved in the control of the study group. Okay, so let me describe what the active learning system is. Okay, the instructor introduces a new concept or activity. Then the students break up into small self-selected groups and they receive support from the course staff. And then the instructor would, after they've gone through this process, the instructor provides feedback to address any student questions and misconceptions that emerge, like, oh, this group, there was a disagreement about this subject. And so it's a very active and engaged kind of classroom. It's not a standard lecture. This is a really progressive kind of way of doing it. Okay, so that active learning format aims to address a bunch of the limitations of typical passive lectures. Good. Now, the AI study week, they work with a thing called PS2Pal, and they interact with this AI tutor. And so the AI tutor doesn't simply provide answers or information passively. It's designed and prompted to encourage the students to think critically, to ask questions, and explain their reasoning to the tutor. So the students are not talking to other students, they're just talking to the tutor. Okay. And the tutor was programmed to present information clear and concise, and also to use encouraging language and all those things that it should do. Okay. So the main advantage of that AI tutor session, this home study week, is that the students are able to learn at their own pace. Okay. So now what were the outcomes? For the module that the students did in the AI tutoring, the students that did that learned more than twice as much and spent less time to learn it than the students who were in the active learning class. Okay. Plus, the higher test scores of the time you spent in the AI tutor was at level M equals 4.5 compared to M equals 3.5. A very substantial difference in the acquisition of knowledge. It's more than double, in effect, what the active lecture group got. So, amazing confirmation of the efficacy of an AI tutor as a teacher in this process outside the classroom. Now, remember that this is in weeks 9 and 10, so the students already have a lot of the benefits of having interaction with the professors and so on. But, this does imply that with a really well-programmed AI tutor, you could learn more faster than you can in a college classroom at the highest levels of pedagogical science.
Which is amazing. And what I love about this is that, there have been studies all along that, if your child or yourself can teach something, anything, right? Like teach the lesson to your dog, you're going to have the lesson more firmly than if you don't engage in that. But this is teaching the lesson. This is like engaging in the lesson, like your dog knows the content, right? Like this is where the correction can then be embedded in the experience, or the there's a little something that you missed over here, right? Like that's so great, this back and forth. I love it.
I like the idea that this could be the replacement for homework. I remember going to school. That was the one thing I didn't like doing. Was homework. You know, I'm out of school. I don't need to do that. But more to the point, the AI tutor provided an extra layer of interaction, like you said, Beth. So they were able to absorb more information. And as I understand it, the purpose of homework is to act as a mnemonic to put into practice the lessons that you learned in the class. So this is the same kind of thing. Now, I wasn't able to find it in the study, and maybe one of you guys saw it, was what was the background of the students educationally? Meaning, what kind of learning systems did they come from? Because I'd be really interested to know if there was any connections we could make to, the public or traditional K through 12 system versus charter versus Montessori, and because we have lots and lots of different educational paths to get them to a higher educational institution. So I'd like to see if there's any information or data we could glean from that.
Yeah, well, there are knowledge limitations of the study. It was very short term, right? You're basically doing 1 week of AI tutoring and comparing that to 1 week of classical, learning. As to the demographics and psychographics of the students, I don't know that there's anything in the paper. By the way, I put the paper, the research paper, into Notebook LM, so we can ask questions of Notebook LM at any time, and it'll analyze what's in the paper and give us a response. But I would say that what you're talking about are highly motivated, very well prepared students at Harvard in physics. Okay, so this is not necessarily applicable to K-12, but I'm confident that there are versions of this approach that could be tuned to K-12.
There would be,
yeah.
Conmigo has been around for almost a year now, for maybe more. We did a show on it. I remember signing up for it in the early days and getting beta. By the way, Conmigo costs like $4 a month. I mean, in terms of being an accessible tool for students, I'm not saying $4 a month is in every budget. I'm not saying that, but it's certainly at the lower end considering what it does. And for those that don't know, Conmigo was built by Khan Academy. They were early on with their adoption of GPT-4. I don't even know if they upgraded to 4.0. And they're big on saying, like, unlike kind of like this study, unlike GPT-4, where if you asked for help, you're more than likely going to get an answer, because that's exactly how they're built. It's an answer machine, essentially. Conmigo will never give you the answer straight up. It will always, like this tool was built for this study, be meant to be there to mentor, to help a student learn in the ways they best understand. I think this goes back to all of us probably can think to a particular teacher that they really enjoyed. I can think of a guy named, he was Coach Clifton. He was in middle school, who just taught really interesting science. Now, I love science anyway, so maybe there's some bias there, but I always remember enjoying going into that class. I always knew it was going to be interesting. He was going to teach it with excitement. He was going to relate it to our middle school brains at that time. He was just really good at doing that kind of stuff. And I always enjoyed his class. I was always excited to do it. And then to use what you're saying, Jimmy, is like homework. Even the homework in that class was more enjoyable because of the way he would set it up and because it was an extension of the class. But as you say, Jimmy, like I also mostly hated homework when it felt like busy work, when it just felt like here's this stack of, we all had the, I know I grew up with the horrible Xerox purple ink, barely legible copies that used to be at the school Xerox machines, and they were copies of copies of copies. And you could barely read anything, and you'd come home with a stack of those, and some teacher would assign you doing, 3 pages of that. And that was just busy work, and it was awful. But if you did, I agree with you, Jimmy, if you replace that with something like a Conmigo or some sort of AI personal tutor, whatever the next order of magnitude is above Conmigo, that has longer context windows, maybe lifetime context windows, which we will eventually get to. That changes drastically. So now you have the ability, you're like, okay, well, I have to add to this subject, or more importantly, maybe that's where the actual learning is being done, is outside of the class, so it can be reinforced with more active learning, critical thinking skills inside the class, where the teacher is actually assisting and leading through discussion on it, but not because they're trying to tell you what 2 + 2 is 4 equals 4 on a board. That can now be handled maybe in a better way, where this AI tutor has enough of an understanding and knowledge of how that particular student or adult learns, and is able to teach 2 + 2 equals 4 in the best method for that child. You know, I didn't grow up with dyslexia or any of your traditional learning disabilities or anything like that. And now schools do a lot better job with that. But you can imagine if you're a child that did, and you were always scared to raise your hand, and you're not gonna, because maybe there's a stutter, or you don't like the way you sound when you read out loud, or whatever. But okay, now you could have this tutor at home who doesn't judge you, and there's no pressure, and there's no stress, and it's just there to help you all the time. Imagine what that does for a child's confidence, if just this tutor is coming back to them saying, you got it, you sound great, you pronounce that word fantastically. Okay, let's read the next paragraph together. Let's do it. All right, I'm listening. What a difference that would be for that child, who could practice and do things at home in a really positive environment, and then probably open that child up when they get back in the classroom to want to contribute. You know, really exciting.
It's been known for some time that the one-to-many classroom average kind of progression through the material doesn't provide the same level of retention as one-to-one conversational tutoring. But the problem has always been a problem of economics. How do you provide one-to-one personalized tutoring to the zillions of students that are required out there? So it never could be scaled before. But AI has the promise of solving the scaling problem for that. Let me just mention that there's been a lot of research around a method of teaching called mastery learning that is even more advanced than active learning. Like we described that method of active learning, which provides engagement in the classroom. Well, mastery learning gets closer to this one-to-one model by making it such that every student has to grasp the concepts and prove that through formative assessments before they can go on to new material. And that means that if a student isn't making it, then they have to get additional support. And that's not necessarily one-to-one. It could be 1 to 5. You know, the teacher's going to get everybody who is having trouble with this concept together and give them additional time. But instead of moving forward on classroom constraints and class averages, this approach insists that each student achieve a high level of learning on the subject that's prerequisite to the next subject before they move on. When you use this mastery learning method, the level of retention is in and around 60%. Want to give a guess at what the level of, and that's measured at some number of months after the presentation of the information. So imagine you're in a classroom, you learn the subject, you pass the test, but then you're tested on it again some 6 months later. If you've been given this mastery method, which is akin to one-to-one tutoring, you'll have 60% recall, not 100% recall, but you'll have 60% recall. What do you think the one-to-many classroom lecture model gives you at that point? Any guesses?
If it was 60% for the other way, I don't know, 20%?
12.
Yeah.
12%. That's how poor the retention is. Now, I'm remembering these just from studies that I've read before, but I am a student of this kind of thing because I'm very interested in you'll see my tagline previously on the show was AI for education and training. I'm very interested in this area, and I follow the influencers, serious influencers who are talking about this model. So I remember these statistics, and I'm very, very excited, therefore, about the prospect of building and deploying a scaled solution to one-to-one personalized, customized engagement not to replace the classroom, because the classroom is really important for lots of other reasons. We can talk about those. But just in terms of mastery of information with critical thinking skills and so on, having an AI tutor that can progress that way will actually give you much higher retention, much higher comprehension and retention over the long term.
And I mean, the real question is, did you use the mastery method to learn and retain the stats that you were just telling us about for the AI that you're training? Is it like is this a meta thing, Andy? Are you like, using mastery in order to, regurgitate and be able to remember more about this?
Oh no, I have no mastery in my learning at all. I'm hoping this for my progeny. Right, I want them to have that benefit.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
I think my level of retention of knowledge that I've gained last week is in the 12%.
Yeah, well, that's the short term stuff. No, listen, is somebody who's obviously my daughter just turned 14 today, so she's at 8th grade, and the watching her go through elementary and then middle school, and watching obviously what teachers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I don't even mean behavioral issues. I just mean it's obviously we don't need to document it here. It's a very difficult job. It has a high level of burnout. There's all sorts of stats that I learned over the years about how many teachers make it past like 2 years. It would be akin to looking at like nursing and stuff. It's like there's similar numbers on there. And we are having a hard time bringing in net new teachers to fill the roles. Now, a lot of that has to do with money, but not all of it does. I think that's where everybody wants to play it first and say, well, teachers simply aren't paid enough. But what you'll find out really quickly is that, in some cases, you could raise teachers' pay significantly to the point where that's no longer a concern with them, but just the toxicity of the culture that they're in. That's not their fault, probably not the principal's fault. It is just the way our school system, our public school system has been working, at least in the States, leads to burnout, leads to them not having any time to really get into probably the love of why they wanted to be a teacher. And I would imagine if you just polled a whole lot of teachers, an answer that you would get back is that, I want to have an influence on children. I want to pass along my knowledge and my understanding to help children. I mean, there's just a pure love there for so many teachers. There's other reasons. So now you look at AI and you go, okay, is this meant to replace teachers? And obviously we're all not saying that's the case, but here's the case I would make for that. Why this is a good thing for teachers, because what it does is it doesn't insist that an otherwise fantastic teacher also has to be a subject matter expert for all types of learners to the one-to-many problem for a specific subject. So they might be great at a particular subject, but I will tell you, on Halloween, I ran into one of my old athletes from when I owned my CrossFit, and she's a teacher. And she said, I got moved from 5th grade science to 4th grade ELA, English. Moved. Now, okay, she's elementary school, but you say, but hold on, did she have a mastery in science? And she said, I like science better. I like science, but there was a need, and she was, newer at this school. She has plenty of years experience, and she was moved. It was not a choice of hers. So now you have teachers that, look, she's the best. I would love any kid I have to be in her class. I love her to death. So now if she has this extra tool that she can put with her students, at that level, at elementary school level, obviously it has to be a little different, maybe more like a Conmigo, more gamified, whatever. And it can help teach this subject as she just got moved into ELA. And she can focus on being herself and making that connection with the student. And in her case, probably giving that extra kid that extra hug, because that goes a really, really long way. I just think this could be a massive benefit overall to education. I actually think it will help burnout. I actually think it will get more high school and college students to go and get their teaching degrees, because what they're going to find out is like, oh, there's no longer this burden on me that I have to be everything to everyone. What I'm actually being hired for is because I'm really good at communicating and talking to this particular age group of children or adults or whatever age they're at. And I have a way of communicating this through story or otherwise that makes me successful what I do. And I understand how to use this AI tool. I know they're going to be able to like nail this maybe in school, at a computer, at home, or whatever the case may be. I think it's absolutely going to revolutionize education, but I do not believe it's going to get rid of teachers. In fact, I think it's going to actually help us keep more teachers, the best teachers, in place. And obviously pay and other things have to happen as well. I think this is actually a boon, but some people feel like this is coming for their job. And I don't particularly see that. I don't know how you guys see it, but I don't see that future.
So I think my friends who are teachers, the conversations that I keep having is kind of like the conversation that I have with newbies who are starting to use AI, right? So they're in a specific lane, and their big concern for teachers is, I don't want students to use it to cheat, right? And the same thing like with I use ChatGPT a little bit. Like I could have written it faster, or it wasn't that great. What those things say to me is, let's have a deeper conversation, because it can be really great. It can be really great in both those scenarios, right? Like, let's talk about, I keep talking to my language teacher about like, you should assign having conversations in French and Spanish with voice, advanced voice. If you can do it, like they can talk about anything. The AI is going to correct them. Like, I think there are so many of those kinds of situations where it's not just enough to say this is possible, but actually a little bit more of the step-by-step, which is why it's so exciting what that Philippa Hardman Substack that I linked to in the show chat.
It was a great article.
So yeah, if this is exciting and you're having a hard time finding out why, like, let us know. Reach out to somebody, because we can get you hooked up.
And but just my quick follow up to that, and I won't go on a long diatribe here, Beth, is that when your friends or let's say people that I know a lot of teachers, and they say, we don't want to help students cheat. I agree with you. Like, this is what that really means is like, let's have a bigger conversation about cheating and what that means. Because what I believe a lot of teachers are actually thinking is, it's not cheating. Let's replace cheating with, I don't want to rob students the joy of discovery. That's where we need to focus. I've mentioned this before. I'll say very quickly. Years and years ago, I did infant swim resource, which was teaching infants how to swim. I was being trained over 6 weeks from a master instructor on how to do that. I was in the pool with infants all the way up to like 2-year-olds. So 6 months at the earliest to 2 years old. Yes, you could teach a 6-month-old how to float in a pool, turn over and float in a pool by themselves. Phenomenal. Who knew, right? But one of the things I remember that sticks with me forever, I mentioned on the show before, was my instructor would say, there was a lot of patterns, and you would do like little waves underneath the infant. And what you're trying to do, if you could imagine the water level sideways here, right? Only their nose is basically above the water level and their eyes are outside the water level. And what you were teaching a 6-month-old was to self-regulate buoyancy to breathe, to stay above the water. So as they were figuring that out at 6 months old, you would do certain techniques. But what you did not want to do is be the hand of God. And that's what my instructor would call it. And the hand of God was that if I, as the instructor, started to see the water, as you would imagine, looking at a 6-month-old's eyes, I might be instinctual and wanting to pick that child right up out of the water. They're literally going underwater, or at least that's my intent, right? That robs that child of the point of discovery. Now, they can't verbalize that. They can't communicate that. But if you just take that idea and take it up through any level, through when I taught it synthesis and stuff, it's the same concepts over and over, is let the children, let the adults have their aha moment. And AI can do that very, very well. But as you point out, Beth, it robs them if all it does is just regurgitate answers. If it's just an answer key over and over and over again, there's probably not a lot of learning being done. And so that's really the difference. It's not Now, we're not saying all AI is the solution. It's specifically formatted and curated AI. And maybe there's a variety of tools like Andy was talking about that are the right solution at different levels. And I definitely think we'll see that. We will see, my daughter uses an app called Photomath. So do many other parents. It's pretty phenomenal. It does math on an app when you take a picture of a problem, and it helps you walk through the reasoning of the problem. I think you'll see this proliferated across all training. Now, it won't be just one AI tutor. It'll be many.
I want to imagine now going forward what the classroom looks like when there is, availability of AI tutoring to teach the students what the subject matter is all about before they come into the classroom. So imagine that you have an AI tutor and your homework is simply to engage with the AI tutor because tomorrow the classroom is going to be discussing this. And assessment changes from producing a paper or writing a test to what's your contribution to the discussion in the classroom. And that actually has a better analog to what's going to be required in the workplace ultimately. Is like, what is your contribution? You have to do your study in advance. You need to come prepared. And now you're going to have a discussion. I'm going to give you two examples. One is this show, right? This show is, we have to study what the subject of the show is. And then we come in and we're going to make commentary about it based on what we know. And in many cases, trust me, we don't know a whole lot about the subject, because there's just so many, facets of the subject of AI. We don't know a lot about it, any one of us, when we come in, the night before the show, but we do the research. So we're using AI to figure out what the issues are, what are the things that can be discussed about this, and then we have a discussion in this context. This is the classroom right here. This is where the most learning is occurring. It's the sharing and the interaction and the challenging and the critical thinking about what our colleague just said. This is similar, by the way, to Harvard Business School's case study method. At Harvard, the whole first year, you're in a group of about 75, 80 people in a big amphitheater classroom. There's 8 such sections. You're in a class that you stay with, but every night you have 3 cases. You have to study those 3 cases. And it's possible that the professor, when he comes in the morning, is going to say, Andy, open the case for us. And you have to expound on your analysis of that case. You better be prepared. If you fail to present something compelling about your analysis of that case as the opener to the discussion, that's going to really send your marks down in the eyes of the professor. So this is a model, I think, for how education might proceed in the classrooms of our grade schools, our high schools, and in colleges, is you prepare in advance with the assistance of an AI tutor. You know the subject matter, and now you're going to break into small groups in the classroom, and you're going to have a discussion. And that's where the real learning progresses.
And so I just want to add to that one of the things that we have to factor in, and we haven't talked about yet on the show, is this idea of accessibility. Because on a campus, even when I was in college, nobody had that I remember. Nobody had computers in their dorm rooms. I'm sure somebody did. Nobody I knew or remember in '96 when I was in college had it. You went to the computer lab, and there was some stuff. There was internet was still really kind of just going at the time. But you had accessibility. I could literally walk down a couple of streets on campus, protected, go to a computer lab that was open 24/7 and get access. But let's just take that back to 2024, now almost in 2025. We know statistically that there's still many, many students within the United States who do not have access or reliable access to the internet. There's actually a really great commercial out right now that talks to that point, and the child is in the back of a minivan, and they park outside of a Starbucks because they can pick up the free Wi-Fi symbol so that the child can do the homework in the back of the van. So this brings up the question of accessibility. And this is something that I've actually heard a friend of mine talk about, Evan Erberg, who runs a company called Proximity Learning, wonderful company, and doing their own work towards helping with the teacher shortages. But he's talked about how we need to open up the schools even more before and after normal school times in order to make sure that there's a safe, reliable place for students to be able to use these new advanced technologies. Otherwise, it's the haves and have-nots. Otherwise, it's prominent. Again, we're going to be right back where we were, where the richest districts have all the tools, and you could assume that all the students have high-speed internet at home and can do all these AI amazing things at home. But not all do. So what are we going to do and again, I'm just speaking from the US. Karl, you may have a different story from Canada, but for the US, what I really feel like the solution is going to have to be is either no, you know what? You couldn't even say we're going to give everybody an iPad. Great. On what signal are they doing this? Unless there's Starlink for everybody for free. Maybe one day we'll have that. But right now, the real solution I feel like is going to have to be, okay, these schools are going to have to open up their hours. And there's going to have to be hours as early as probably 6 a.m. and as late as 5 or 6 or 7 p.m., even when school sports are going on. So students can go into a classroom where they would have these AI-assisted tutors to do the work that we know is going to be so valuable back to the teacher. Otherwise, if you don't do that, to your point, your story, Andy, which was beautiful, which is, hey, lead off this discussion today, Brian. And I go, have any access. There's no way for me to lead off the discussion. I had no access since the time I left school property till the time I got back on. I wasn't able to do any of that. But the kid next to me has high-speed internet at home, and they're like, me. I know. I was able to do the work. So just want to bring that up because that's like, we will run into that. And it's such an important part about, we have this new technology that we're excited about. Great. How are we going to get it into everybody's hands?
Yeah, that raises the question: Will my children and grandchildren? My children are already out of school, so will they have access to an AI tutor before the rest of their classroom? Do I give them that advantage, or is it important to insist that any such advanced technology applied to education be universally available before it's available to anyone?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and listen, I would say my daughter has, I don't know, Karl, we have similar age kids. I would say my daughter has a competitive advantage because of me. Because I look and I'm watching what's going on in AI, and I usually know what's going on, and I know about things like Conmigo, and I know about things like Photomath, and I know about these other tools that could be helpful to her. And yes, I'm there making sure that they're not just giving her their answers, that they're there to help her learn. But is that a competitive advantage for her right now? Sure, absolutely. Because I'm teaching her how to use AI responsibly along the way. And I'm teaching her about how to do critical thinking skills using AI along the way. And those are tools that are going to help her for her whole life,
I mean, you'd say that I'm not aware of yet a personalized AI tutor that has this sort of long context about what I know and what I don't know. I believe that's out in the future. Mm-hmm. But right now, if you're a parent and you are wondering what I can provide to my children now to give them an advantage in terms of acquisition of knowledge as part of the preparation of going through the academic, certification process, if you will, validating that you know something. I don't know that anything out there is yet to that level. I think there are conversational assistants like Conmigo, but I'm not certain. I haven't played with Conmigo recently, although I did early in 2023. I don't know whether it's at the point where it knows what the student knows and has memory sufficient to know this student, has these peculiar requirements in order to really grasp the information that I wanted to understand through my assessments in real time.
It's a good question. I was looking at the FAQs as you're saying that. The answer is I don't know the answer to that. But it'd be good for us to go back and look. I haven't looked at Conmigo in a bit either from that standpoint. So it'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see what the context window is. Didn't we just, not to pivot, but didn't we just see too, like somebody had quick access to O1 preview and it was 200,000 tokens or something like that, and then immediately was shut down? I don't know. We could talk about that tomorrow on the news show. But Andy, the proxy for longer context windows are parents, because who's going to know their child better, their little differences and stuff better than an adult who can stand in. So you're right. One day maybe that will be built in and the child will be able to the AI will know. But that doesn't mean that a parent can't sit alongside their child with AI and be that proxy context window.
Well, I'm skeptical about that, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
We tried at grade 6, my wife and I tried to do homeschooling with my daughter, Ella. We didn't have the time to do that effectively. We didn't have the education to do it effectively. It really needs to stay in the educational institutions where the teachers have gone through careful preparation. And then there ought to be a more standardized and uniform way of presenting that, because the skills of individual parents in supporting their children are going to be too varied. Whereas you want to present to all of the children, in order to educate the entire population, you want to present the very best resources to them. And I'm afraid we were insufficient. And if we were insufficient by distraction or just lack of preparation, then most parents are likely to be insufficient to the education of their child.
Well, I'm going to push back on that, because I do know many parents who have been very successful in homeschooling, despite not having a background in education.
Yeah.
My wife and I did it sort of in first grade for half of a year, but it was like a hybrid where my daughter still had, because we were over in Europe. So my daughter still had teachers, but my wife and I were also involved. It was also first grade. So most of that falls into a general knowledge. Now my daughter is doing advanced geometry. And the minute I look at a problem, I go, why? What is it going to take me? An hour to get caught up to where this one particular question is? I'm almost useless to my daughter unless I have photomath and I'm on the side and I'm like, I don't understand how to do this. Please explain to me what geometry is again. It's been so long, right? So it is obviously as you go through the edge. But I do want to push back a little bit on that, Andy, because I hear you, but there are so many parents who have done this wonderfully. I am in your boat though. It makes me so did COVID for a lot of people, made people very, very happy about the role of a teacher and what they go through. And I think COVID was a big wake up call for lots of parents during that period, because they were like, oh,
well, I'm glad you know a lot of parents who have the patience, the time, and the capacity to be effective assistants in the education process. I remain skeptical, just because I think most parents are exhausted and the demands of their workplace and or just maintaining the household are beyond really delivering the time and attention necessary to teach a child.
So I want to imagine, and I do not have children. This is a theoretical conversation for me. But Claude has a 200,000 context window and has the ability to have multiple files uploaded for a particular discussion. Notebook LM has the ability to have multiple files uploaded for a discussion. I haven't done anything with GEMS, but Notebook LM is from Google anyway. So those kinds of things, I wonder if you were just on the just had the intention to continue to upload the new documents about what your child or what you yourself has mastered, if that couldn't help supplement the memory, right? So it's not the LLM isn't making the memories. You are supplementing the memory information to say this is the new status.
I don't see why not, right? And I mean, Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, but Google's even more than aren't they up to 2 million in some instances with Ultra? So I mean, you can go even farther than that, and truly multimodal, which might also help for some of that, context and stuff. I don't think we talk enough about Google, honestly, on this show. We give them lots of crap, but when it comes to what Gemini is capable of, and it was built as a multimodal and its context window, it's still at the top of the ranks, I think. But anyway, I think it's a really good point that you can supplement that. And something I've wanted to do, I've not done it before, is so my daughter is in public school. Every single thing she learns, there's a taxonomy to that. And I know that's going to ring bells internally because we've talked about projects with taxonomies. But think about it. Every one of them has a core learning curriculum attached to it. And they usually have numbers like 1.12. And it's like child must be able to correctly, whatever, if it's history and it's American history, right? There's going to be some sort of tag after that, some metadata after that says, this is the gist of what they need to know. This is exactly what a teacher has to abide by. It's not like they can be willy-nilly. They have to abide by these standards. These are, in my case, Florida standards, right? So that's public. That's not like locked behind a door. Literally any homeschooling parent or any person can get access to it. They're on the web. So to your point, take the core learning standards, marry that with some sort of historical context window. Maybe like you always talk, Beth, the answer for a parent is, hey, I don't know how to make this history knowledge document about my child, but I bet you if I got the LLM to ask me questions, we could fill it out together. Work with the LLM in a conversation interview style, which you've always talked about, Beth, as being very powerful for you. Build the document together using something like Canvas inside of ChatGPT, where it's going to actually create the document and iterate and make differences on it. Then save that document. That becomes now your context, your RAG system, your vector stored database on it, and then marry that with an LLM that's got all of the stored points of interest that a child has to do. Now you're getting pretty close to something that's probably for less than a half of a weekend worth of your time going to become an AI tutor for your child. It's going to be slightly geared specifically towards your child's learning styles, their likes, their desires, those kind of things, what they might want to do in the future. And it's going to have all the learning standards that you know they are going to be tested on throughout the whole year. You could set this up in June and have it done for an entire school year's worth of stuff. Anybody could do that. It's not.
Yet another $1 million idea. This is a tool, an AI-assisted tool for parents to assist their students in the progression through the core curriculum.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, look, that's every state, I can't speak for like Canada or other places, but this is public knowledge. I mean, it's not like this is lock and key type stuff. You might have to say I'm a home instructor or whatever it might be in order to get access to it. But it's also like saying like every parent can get access to the teacher edition of a book. Yeah, every parent can get access to that. Of course you can, right? That has all the answers in this thing. Well, it's the same thing. But now we have the language models, which are very, very smart. So you can put those two together. And if a child is stuck, especially if you're a parent, you're like, I don't know, I like American history. I haven't talked about that in forever, but I know what they have to know. And I know how my child learns best. And now I could actually work with the LLM and say, hey, I'm about to use you, but here's the context in the prompt. I don't want you to give them the answer. This is the background on it. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm pretty good up until this point, but I suffer after that, meaning the parent. Now let's start the process. That's your prompt. The child doesn't see that. The child sees the beginning of the sitting next to the child and saying, how are you going to do it? Now, look, that's a little advanced. I get it. Not every parent's going to sit out there and do this. I just want to put it out there that this is stuff that quite literally is available to every single parent right now. It's just a little bit of work in putting the pieces together, and you could probably cobble together a very good.
We should make a note to create a prompt and share it with our audience that achieves that if they want to try that, along with one of the tools that Beth mentioned. Before we close, I wanted to just mention to Gwyn, because we don't know how to respond to a LinkedIn comment, that you can't see the chat that you're normally a central part of, because you logged in through LinkedIn rather than YouTube. And apparently on LinkedIn, you can only see your own comments to the show, not everybody else's comments on the show. So if you go back to YouTube tomorrow, you should be okay.
Yeah, good call out on that. All right. Any other thoughts, comments on this one? Obviously, this is a conversation. We talked about this before. We've done shows on it, and we will continue to come back to it as there's more evolution as this space. I think 2025 is going to be a very interesting year, especially as we get into the stuff like agents and things that we've talked about before. That's going to all start to converge here. And it's going to be pretty interesting when these AI agents that are education-based are able to start connecting and conversing with other AI education agents. And I think that's an explosion of knowledge like we perhaps can't even conceive of this at this time. And that might be by the next time we talk on the, like if it was 1 year from today, we might be talking about some of those early indicators of that. So really, really interesting area. Andy, you've obviously been working on, we've been working on the background with some education stuff for projects within our show. So, stay tuned on this one. Hopefully this is interesting to you. Hopefully it opened your eyes to some of the potential and possibilities. And it's not the teacher killer. I think it's quite perhaps like if we do it right and we get access to all students and make sure it's equitable education, equity for all, then I think there's a lot of potential here. So that's it. All right, we'll wrap that up. Listen, tomorrow is the news. So come on back. We hinted at some of this stuff, some early access to O1 preview that then went south and dark again. There's always something like that where somebody digs into the code faster than OpenAI or one of the big makers here can turn it off. So we usually get some insight. So we'll talk about that tomorrow as well, all the other news that came out over the last 7 days. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us in the comments and everywhere else. You always go to thedailyashow.com. You can sign up for the newsletter there. That goes out every Sunday. It's free. And I think you'll probably really enjoy it. So check it out if you get a chance. Have a great day. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Hello.